What do you think life will be like in the future? When you imagine living in the future, do you think about George Jetson, his wife Jane, their kids Judy and Elroy, and their lovable dog Astro, living in Orbit City, letting their household robot Rosie take care of the household chores? Or do you think of the USS Enterprise and the cast of Star Trek with the bad haircuts and pointy ears? Like many of you, I grew up watching the Jetsons and Star Trek, but I don't think I ever truly imagined that the technology would be in place in my lifetime to make space travel, let alone living in space, a reality for the masses. So I started off wanting to explore the technology surrounding getting to and living in space, which led me to Elon Musk's SpaceX and the International Space Station. I was fairly familiar with Musk's electric car, the Tesla, because every time one drives down the road, my 10-year-old announces it and we ooh and ah about how cool it is, which leads to the inevitable discussion of his favorite car and what he wants to drive when he grows up. But I knew much less about SpaceX and the International Space Station, and the fact that we've had people living in space for the last 20 years. But let's start with Elon Musk and his vision to make humans an interplanetary species. An interesting side note here is that my research led me to a YouTube video he posted in September 2020 entitled My Final Warning, where he expressed his fear surrounding artificial intelligence and its potential harm to the human race. In the video, he warns that our country has lived through 3 world wars in the last 100 years, so the likelihood of a 4th, in his opinion, is fairly high. He thinks we need to prepare for this eventuality by developing a life-sustaining base on Mars in the event that the world as we know it is wiped out by a world war. Well, whatever his motivation to pursue interplanetary living, his vision involves developing a fully reusable rocket, akin to a commercial airplane, with short turnaround times between flights and where the only major cost is fuel. Making this a reality involves all kinds of new technology, including vertically landing a rocket as opposed to crashing it into the ocean, so its parts can be used again. This is called a grasshopper landing, shown here, and after several explosive failures, or what he preferred to call rapid unplanned disassembling, he was able to make that dream a reality. One of his engineers credits Elon's success in SpaceX to his ability to make mistakes and pointed out that they learned far more from failures than from incremental improvements. But let me back up and give you a little history on Elon and what led to his starting SpaceX. Early in his career, Elon decided he wanted to build a greenhouse on Mars and grow plants. In order to do this, he needed a rocket, and through the course of his research, he found that Russian rockets were far more affordable than US rockets. So he approached the Russian Space Agency about purchasing one of theirs. In that meeting, the Russian chief designer apparently became so incensed with Elon that he actually spit on his shoes to show his disgust. Spurned by this lack of respect, Elon decided to make his own. Taking money he made from the sale of PayPal, he rolled those funds into making the Falcon 1. One of the most interesting things I learned about Falcon 1 is that early on, Elon realized that he had enough money for 3 launches. Unfortunately, all 3 launches failed miserably and blew up before liftoff. Discouraged but not giving up, he cobbled together a 4th rocket with used and leftover parts and successfully launched Falcon 1 in 2008, making it the first successful orbital launch of any privately funded and developed, fully liquid-propelled carrier rocket. And that was just the catalyst he needed. SpaceX received its first NASA contract in 2008 for $1.6 billion to fly supplies to the International Space Station, and since then he has launched more than 16 cargo missions to the ISS for NASA. But what is the space station? Again, like SpaceX, I had a cursory understanding of what that was, but I wanted to learn more. The International Space Station is actually a large spacecraft originally launched by Russia in 1998 that orbits the Earth and has had astronauts living there consecutively since November 2nd, 2000. The space station is also a science lab that many countries work together to build and is made of many pieces put together by astronauts, likely with parts brought there by SpaceX. This space station's orbit is approximately 250 miles above Earth, and NASA uses the station to learn about living and working in space. The station is as big as inside as a house with 5 bedrooms. It has 2 bathrooms, a gymnasium, and a bay window. While only 6 people are able to live there at one time, It weighs almost 1,000,000 pounds and is big enough to cover a football field, including the end zones. It has science labs from the United States, Russia, Japan, and Europe. The space station has many parts called modules. On the sides of the space station are solar arrays that collect energy from the sun and turns that sunlight into electricity. Robot arms are attached outside the station and were used to build it, and they can also move astronauts around outside and control science experiments. Like the Starship Enterprise, airlocks on the space station are like doors, and astronauts use them to go outside on spacewalks. Docking ports are like doors too, and they allow visiting spacecraft to connect to the space station. The mission of the International Space Station is to enable long-term exploration of space and provide benefits to people on Earth. It is hoped that it will allow for advancements in medicine, technology, and science. For example, studies in micro and hypergravity will help researchers better understand its effects on humans and offer insight into how the human body works. Growing protein crystals in a space environment can help scientists create better treatment for numerous diseases that currently have no cure. In addition, the laboratories on the space station will allow for innovative space research projects to improve our understanding of the Earth's environment and the universe in which we live. So, how realistic is space travel and living in space? While I don't have a crystal ball, I can tell you that there are several companies vying with Elon's SpaceX to make space travel for recreational purposes available to the common man. While the Russian Space Agency is the only company that has successfully facilitated orbital space tourism, the concept of space tourism is growing in popularity, and I predict it will be a race to the finish line. Some of the big players in the industry are Virgin Galactic, who already has an extensive waiting list of space tourists, Blue Origin, basing their technology around more of a traditional rocket known as New Shepard, which takes off and lands vertically, Orionspan, which announced plans for a private commercial space station called the Aurora Space Station and hopes to have paying guests by 2022, and of course, Boeing. Who knows who will be the first to be able to monetize space travel, but I predict living in space will not be far off.